Welcome back to DCS and welcome to the DCS F-16 Viper. This is actually my first look at the DCS Viper, so all I'm doing here is just flying along, looking at the instruments and just getting a feel for how well it's done, and it is done pretty well. That's the great thing about DCS, you're getting aircraft that look really nice. So I will be creating tutorials for the DCS Viper. The aircraft is not complete yet, so I will be a little bit limited in the tutorials that I can create for it. I will be adding more detail than I did with the BMS tutorials, at least for the early ones. I have a longer startup video planned that will go into greater detail to talk about the engine and the systems. I want to give you a greater feel for the technicalities of the aircraft. If you followed my tutorials, you know that I prefer not to give simple button clicking tutorials. I like to go into greater detail about how the aircraft works, how the systems work, and how it all comes together, and I will try to do that as much as I possibly can with the F-16. So we will be covering ground we've already covered, but hopefully you're going to find the additional information useful and interesting. I don't know how long it's going to take me to get to the more complex systems, because that's going to be dependent on when ED actually add all the systems. I'm not sure when it's supposed to be complete. I think it might be next year. I think they talked about completing the Hornet this year. I don't know if they, offhand, I don't know if they included the F-16 in that, but I would be surprised if it's feature complete by the end of the year. But I'm expecting to see more systems added. So as you can see, it looks so much better than BMS. BMS has that great advantage of the dynamic campaign. I've noted that ED are, I don't know if they're developing it or it's a wish list item, but there's mention of a dynamic campaign. I wouldn't expect it to approach anywhere near the depth and complexity of the BMS campaign, but then again, are we ever going to see a campaign that's quite as good as the BMS campaign? Will I do more BMS? I would like to. I mean, as I get more into the DCS F-16, I will refresh my memory on all the detail in the F-16, and that should help with BMS. The issue I have with BMS is that it's difficult to set up scenarios. It's so much easier in DCS to set up situations and then explain whatever I'm doing through that situation. With the BMS scenario editor, I find it really difficult to put the aircraft in a specific spot, facing in a particular direction at a particular altitude and speed. It tends to improvise its own solution. So setting up an approach and landing scenario is much more difficult in BMS than it is in DCS. And of course DCS, as I mentioned, just looks so much better. It doesn't look perfect. I think the Nevada terrain looks a little bit blocky, looks a little bit low resolution. Looks like a low resolution mesh. But even so, it does look better. Of course, we're expecting better clouds. Who knows, maybe this year, looking at the externals on that. It is a good looking model. I don't think you can really fault that. I think this is the only skin that's available. I may be wrong on that. but it feels good, it handles really well, as you'd expect. So I'm looking forward to exploring it. I'm looking forward to seeing exactly what ED have implemented at this moment. I'm not hugely familiar with the DCS Viper. I haven't followed it as closely as I might have, but it will be interesting to see what they've implemented and how well they've implemented it. I've yet to set up the views. The DCS view system I'm not a great fan of. It's a bit awkward setting up views. You kind of have to live with views that are suboptimal at times. I'd like to see that updated at some point to make it more flexible. One of the great things about X-Plane is how easy with X-Camera it is to set up views just how you like them. You can't really do that with DCS. You can create usable views but not ideal views, but hopefully they will give enough quality in the views that I can explain things well. So that's to come during this year. I'm going to be doing more DCS Viper videos, so hope you enjoyed that first look at the DCS Viper, and as always feel free to like, comment and subscribe.